Well, happy Father's Days to all the daddies, to all of our daddies, incarnate and discarnate. May we give them a little bit of our thoughts today. It will be a wonderful gift. Today we start chapter 8. We kind of leave behind the physical manifestations per se. We covered apparitions. We will talk about apparitions over here, but the topic itself now is a different one, okay? The laboratory of the invisible world. I personally like a lot. It's quite simple. There is not much things are difficult to understand, and there's a lot of what one would say that almost blind faith, in the sense that a lot of information that we get over here is given to us, especially by the spirit of that was once St. Louis. Everything is quite reasonable, but if somebody asks, well, can you prove that? Likely not. Can you demonstrate that? Likely not. You have to remember that you're dealing with the laboratory of the invisible world. The word invisible is not here by chance. It's an invisible world. It's pretty much impossible for us to do research, to do studies on this invisible world. And St. Louis will let us know very often here that is things beyond your ability to understand. In saying that, there's a lot of things that is a little bit of a blind faith, trusting what you have learned so far. I mean, we covered a lot of stuff here already, okay? And trusting the spirits of St. Louis, the good spirits that brought us this doctrine, and trust Allan Kardec that being extremely intelligent and reasonable man would not put in a book something that could be any kind of doubt to us. And I say that because I spend a lot of time thinking of this issue of, well, just because St. Louis said it's true, each one you're going to have to make that decision. I made my decision. To me, it is totally acceptable. And unless somebody bring evidence that it's not true, to me it's true. Okay?
The laboratory of the invisible world, spirit clothing, the spontaneous formation of tangible objects, the modification of the properties of matter, and curative magnetic action. (126) We have stated that spirits often appear dressed in tunics, enveloped in flowing drapery, or in ordinary clothes. Flowing drapery seems to be what is generally worn in the spirit world. However, we might ask where they find clothes that are similar in every way to those worn in life, along with all the added accoutrements. They obviously did not take these objects with them, since such objects remain behind with us. So where do they obtain the clothing they wear in that other world? This is a highly intriguing question, but for many it is no more than mere curiosity. Nevertheless, it raised a very important issue, whose solution led us to discover a general law that may be equally applied to our own corporal world. Numerous facts have complicated the subject and have exposed the insufficiency of suggested theories. Up to a certain point, the existence of clothing per se would be acceptable because we could regard it as being in some way part of the individual. However, the same cannot be said regarding accoutrements, such as the snuff box of the man who visited the ill lady discussed in number 16 above. We should note that in that particular case, we were dealing with a deceased person, but a living one, and that when the visitor returned in person, he had an identical snuff box. Then where did his spirit find the one used at the foot of the ailing woman's bed? We could cite numerous cases in which the spirits of both deceased and living individuals appeared with various objects such as sticks, weapons, tobacco pipes, lanterns, books, etc. We then had an idea inert objects might be ethereal components in the invisible world, and the condensed matter that forms various objects might contain a quintessential component that our senses cannot detect. Although this theory was not devoid of probability, it could not explain all the facts. There was one in particular that appeared to frustrate all interpretations. Until then, we had only dealt with images or appearances, and we had already seen that the perispirit can assume the properties of matter and render itself tangible. But this tangibility is temporary, and solid objects can vanish like shadows. Such a phenomenon is in and of itself quite extraordinary. But what is even more impressive is the production of matter that remains solidified, which has been demonstrated by numerous authenticated occurrences, notably those involving direct writing, which we shall return to in more detail in a special chapter. However, since these phenomena are immediately connected to our present subject and represent one of its more positive manifestations, we shall anticipate the order by making a few preliminary remarks at this time.
Thank you. So we had covered the top cover operations, the top cover apportation, remember, right? When spirits bring things from the spiritual world, or when the spring bring things from the physical world from one point to another point. So the question now is, okay, we understand that the spirits are nothing more than we without a physical body. We understand that their lives continue in the spiritual world. But when those spirits appear to us in a physical phenomenon, apparitions, or even for the mediums, for the seeing mediums, those who are able to see the spirits, they are dressed. They have clothes on. They have things that they commonly use. They may have something in their hands. They may have jewelry. Where those things come from? Were perhaps the Egyptians right when they would bury the dead ones with all the belongings because they would make use of it when they return? Maybe they make use, even before they return, they make use of this in the spiritual world. How is that possible? And we human beings are a reasonable being, an intelligent being. We think all the time, and we want to find answers for those kind of questions. And curiosity is a very good thing you think when it's properly used because it generates research, and research generate answers, right? So Kardec was intrigued by this issue of clothing, of um, other things like jewelry, like this snuff box in this case, that he mentions as an example only to us over here. How is that possible to have all those things? Let's assume that I am a seeing medium, which I'm not. But I remember when my grandmother died, she was dressed on a white dress with a flower on the top of the dress. And every time that she appears to me and I see her, she has something else. She has everything but not that dress that she was buried with. What happened? She changed clothes? Yes, because she's appeared with different clothes. But what was the how did you get the clothes that now she appears to me? I think it's a very intriguing, very good question that deserves a little research. And Kardec could not let the opportunity pass by. And we create theories. In order to do a research, you start with a hypothesis, right? You put that a hypothesis to a trial, and very often you dismiss that hypothesis because it's not good. There is a fork along the way that impedes the continuation of that hypothesis, though it's not possible. And of course, Kardec did the same thing because this is scientific process, right? So one of the theories, they believe in the existence of clothing per se because you would get regarded as it's being in some way part of the individual. So meaning that the clothing that they show up with, it's part of the spirit makeup. So how do they change it then? The spirit makeup changes, like my grandmother was buried with certain clothes, and now she appears to me with different clothes. The most common appearance of the spirit, especially more elevated spirits, is the drapery, is that long thing, right? Of flowing draperies is what's generally worn in the spiritual world. Well, how many people are buried with those? Probably none, right? Where did they get this? If it's part of the makeup, why some have something says wear something, others wear different things. So it was very quick to put that hypothesis aside. Another hypothesis: inert objects might have etheric or correspondences in the visible world. It's pretty much of the two words now of Plato, the world of the ideas is the real world, and over here we live in the shadow, the world of the shadow, and the world of the shadow is not as perfected as good like the world of ideas. So things that we have here, that is in that world of ideas, that is in the spiritual world, but that it's perfected. We corrupt that perfection with our ignorance when we do things here. That also did not hold true. Another idea is that those that the spirits kind of dematerialize, materialize again, and present us with that. Well, do you know that's true during the apportation? Not even that's really true, because what happens with the in apportation, we covered that material with ectoplasm. But assume that it's true. If they modify the nature of the matter that we use, that should be temporary. And we know there is some apportations of things that are brought from the spiritual world, objects, tridimensional objects, that they bring, let's say, a flower, that they bring anything from the spiritual world pertaining to the spiritual world, they present to us, they have a very short life. They disintegrate eventually. Okay, so much so that when they wanted to keep those things an example, they would cover with paraffin. What's the word paraffin again in English, Joe? Well, they'd cover. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
I don't know, forgot.
Yeah, okay, no problem. And render it visible for prolonged time. But there is one special physical phenomenon in pneumatography or direct writing that we're going to Kardec will describe here that it stays. It doesn't go away. And that's very intriguing because the the clothes they wear, the present was as described, they should also disappear soon, and they don't. And that does not explain how pneumatography or direct writing comes to the paper and stays in the paper, doesn't disappear. So let's read what is pneumatography. And
120,
I'm sorry?
I was going to read.
Okay.
127. Direct writing or pneumatography, oh boy,
Pneumatography.
is writing, sorry?
Pneumatography.
Pneumatography
Yeah.
is writing that is produced spontaneously without the medium using his or her hand or a pencil. All that is needed is a clean sheet of paper, which can be prepared taking all necessary precautions in order to prevent any kind of fraud. The paper is folded and placed somewhere in a drawer or simply on a piece of furniture. Under the proper conditions, within a certain amount of time, letters or various marks, words, sentences, and even entire communications will appear on the paper, usually in some dark substance resembling graphite, but sometimes as though written with a red pencil, ordinary ink, or even printer's ink. Such is the phenomenon in its simplest form, and whose reproduction, although not very common, is not that rare either, for there are mediums that can induce it very easily. When a pencil is placed together with the paper, one might believe that the spirit has utilized it to write with. But when only the paper is provided, it is obvious that the writing has been produced by matter put there by the spirit itself. Where did the spirit obtain it? We were led to the solution of this question by the snuff box example mentioned earlier.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Okay, so we start by saying that pneumatography is not all that common, not absolutely rare per se, extremely rare. It seems to be less and less and less being used since we don't need that much more proof of the existence of spirits any longer. This kind of phenomena are kind of being less and less used. But pneumo air, graphy, writing. So writing comes from the air, so to say. You pick up a piece of paper, you put somewhere on top of a furniture, you put inside of a drawer containing absolutely nothing, only one piece of paper. You close the drawer and you lock it. And after some time, you open the drawer and there is words or drawings or something, even whole messages written on that piece of paper. That's pneumatography just per se. The thing is, what's written in that paper, there appears like ink, it appears pencil, graphite, right? We cannot say what it is, but it appears to be. That's how Kardec places it. It stays, it doesn't disappear. That generates a lot of questions. How did they bring their own pencil or their own instrument to write? If so, where did they get it? Did they have this over there in the spiritual world? Right? It raises a lot of questions. And another question, why does it stay? The tridimensional objects that they bring a book from the spiritual world, let's say, and present it to us. That book will disappear like shadows, as Kardec says himself. But the writing, the ink, stays. I believe pictography also stays. Pictures, drawing by spirits also stays. They don't disintegrate like tridimensional objects. I don't know if that's the case for all of them, but we know that some of them do stay. Okay, so Kardec, of course, wants to understand that and count with the assistance of St. Louis for most of the question that he has over here. And now is the part that I said that is a bit of blind faith, but it's blind faith based on what we already know, what you already understand about life in the spiritual world. If you combine what you have studied so far in this book with what we had already seen in the Spirit's book, it gives us a good base, a good foundation to understand the answers given by St. Louis and to have the foundation to see how reasonable those answers are. To fully accept and believe is a personal thing. Each one will decide on their own. And I say that because no, we cannot. Somebody say, can you prove it? No, I cannot prove it. Okay. Can you demonstrate? No, I cannot demonstrate. It's in the invisible world. Okay, you have to combine what's given to us here with the Spirit's book, with the books of André Luiz, with the books of Manuel Filomena. If we put all those things together, we have a very good foundation to see how reasonable, how truthful the answers of St. Louis, of the Spirit that played St. Louis is. 128.
St. Louis gave us the solution with the following responses. Number one, we have cited a case involving the apparition of a living person's spirit who carried a snuff box and took pinches from it now and then. Did it feel the same sensations that we would feel in such a case? No.
Okay. So this spirit, you guys remember that the spirit that was an incarnate spirit went to visit a lady who was very ill in the other side of town. He went in an out-of-body experience to visit that lady. And when he presented himself there, he had this snuff box with him. Okay, so even in a out-of-body experience present as a spirit perispirit complex, he was dressed as the way he is, normally alive. Again, this is incarnated, okay, and had this snuff box. And not only had that, as he took it, the tobacco that's inside of those things, right? He sniffed and Kardec asked, would he have the same sensation? And I'm sorry, did it feel the same sensation, the spirit? And the answer is no. Just plain no. No explanation, nothing to it. Kardec did not extend yet, but keep that question in mind because we're going to come back to that a little bit later. So the spirit would not feel the same. It would not have the same sensation as we have when we sniff tobacco, okay? Number two?
Number 2. The snuff box had the same shape as the one the man habitually used at home. What was the snuff box that the spirit was using? An appearance. It was made to look like the real object in order to be noticed, and so that the apparition would not be taken to be only a hallucination caused by the seer's state of health. The spirit wanted the lady to believe he was really present, and so he took on all the appearances of reality.
Okay, so again, the spirit want to make sure that the woman would truly understand that that was really him that was dead, not just an illusion, not just a dream, not just a hallucination secondary to her illnesses. And so he made sure that you'd present with as real with all the appendices, snuff box and everything that he has in normal in his normal state. Now, the word appearance is very important. Kardec going to explain, so let's wait for his explanation. 3.
You have said it was an appearance, but an appearance is not actually real. It is like an optical illusion. We would like to know if the snuff box was an unreal image or if there was something material about it. Of course, there was. It is with the help of this material principle that a perispirit can appear dressed in clothes similar to those that it wore while alive. Obviously, we must understand the word appearance to mean aspect, imitation. The spirit was not carrying the real snuff box. It was only a representation of it. Hence, it was an appearance when compared to the original, although composed of a material substance. Experience has taught us that we must not always take the expressions used by spirits as being literal. If we interpret them according to our own ideas, we expose ourselves to big mistakes. That is why we must get to the bottom of the meaning of these words whenever they present the least ambiguity. The spirits themselves constantly make this very recommendation. Without the above explanation, the word appearance, which is always used in similar cases, could be wrongly interpreted.
Thanks. So with the word appearance, Kardec wants an explanation to the word that St. Louis used. That's how methodical and keen on details Kardec is, right? What do you mean by appearance? That is just an illusion. He didn't have something real in his hand, and St. Louis said, "No, it is real. It is. Don't you understand now that the perispirit is matter also?" And the perispirit can manipulate matter in the spirit in the spiritual world. So that Snuffbox was real. There was a representation, although real, of it. So we need to understand the word appearance here pretty much as an imitation, as a copy. If we would go to the bedroom of this man, we would find him sleeping on the bed, and the snuff box will be there next to him. And at some time, his spirit perispirit complex would be in that lady house holding that snuff box. And that snuff box is matter, is a bruise snuff box, but it's not the same that he has while he is in his conscious state. As if, let's say, that I have a very fancy watch, and I really like that very fancy watch. Let's say that is a $25,000 watch. I don't know, that's a lot of money for me. And when I go to areas where there is a risk of being robbed, somebody try to assault me, I have a fake one. I have one made in China instead of the original made, I don't know, in Switzerland. And it's an exactly copy. Looks very much like. Only the well-trained eyes would be able to tell the difference. So when I go to areas when I think there is a risk of being assaulted, somebody might want that fancy watch, I put that on and I go out with it. If somebody goes to my home and they're gonna see the real one, no, in my drawer, but when I'm up there, I'm presenting a real material watch, but it's not exactly the one that has greater value. This is the same case here. Now the question, of course, is how, right? Well, the spirits are made to do this. And that's what Kardec's going to question St. Louis law. Is there any question? I want to make sure everybody agrees with this.
I have, we know of the precipitated paintings, right? In Lilydale, they have many, which is direct painting without the painter using his own tools. It's you leave the canvas and it starts appearing a picture, and there are many famous ones in Lilydale. Of course, a lot of accusations of fraud, but I think it's worth to share, if you can see, the Lincoln, which is the most famous one, that were done by the Campbell brothers, but without them ever touching the canvas. They were the mediums that were the instrument used for these direct paintings or precipitated paintings. When I visit Lilydale, you get very close to the painting and you see no signs of the brush or anything. So it's very interesting. Of course, there is a lot of accusations and everything. There are other paintings, there are Napoleon and others, but it's very interesting. And if you really understand the process, like Kardec explains to us, and you look at these things, you understand the process and you understand the rationale behind it. So it becomes very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, the pictography. And they do stay, as Ron mentioned. So, of course, I am coming out with my own hypothesis on mine, don't take it, is that the tridimensional things being more dense require them a lot more energy and matter, cannot stay for a long time. But the writings and the paintings that is, bidimensional or one-dimensional even, does not require that much matter, that much energy, and are able to stay, I don't know, throughout eternity, but for a long time.
Yeah, I think there is the spirits use the ectoplasm, of course, for the paintings, for the writings, but they must use something else for them to stay permanently, right?
Yeah, they have to bring something from the spiritual world that has some kind of affinity with metal, the physical world, to stay for a long time. But again, we don't know. I think the comment of Kardec is very important when he says, if we interpret them according to our own ideas, we expose ourselves to big mistakes. And that in relationship with the words brought by the Spirit, right? It says, experience has taught us that we must not always take the expressions used by the Spirit as being literal. If we interpret them according to our own ideas, we expose ourselves to big mistakes. I think it's extremely important, not only for spiritism, but all the so-called scriptures, sacred scriptures. If you start reading things literally, word by word, and especially putting our own bias towards it, we put ourselves at a risk of making serious mistake and completely misunderstand the messages that is being brought to us. One of the things that is very difficult to imagine for the spirit is to tell us things that we do not have an exact correspondent here in the physical world, to create an analogy, and they will perhaps make an analogy using something from here that is the closest but not quite of what they have in the spiritual world. If you don't have the ability to expand a little bit our potential of thinking beyond of the word itself, is expose us to a lot of risks of making mistakes. And we see that when in theologies, they will take the words of Christ absolutely literally, when individuals take the words of the first Testament literally, the first man and the first woman was Adam and Eve, and Eve was created from a rib of Adam. If you take those things literally, if and there are a lot of people that still take that literally, we expose ourselves to a lot of mistakes and to disconsider the hard work of science because of the serious mistake of reading scriptures as literal books and not as book of metaphors to teach us valuable moral lessons. Okay, let's continue.
Number 4. Could inert matter be reproduced? Could the invisible world contain an essential matter that assumes the forms of the objects we see in this world? In other words, could the objects in this world have their etheric double in the invisible world in the same way that humans are represented there by spirits? Such is not the case. A spirit exerts a power over the material elements scattered throughout the space of your atmosphere, a power that you are far from having any inkling about. A spirit can concentrate these elements by using its will and give them the appearance that matches its intentions. One may notice that this question was the translation of our thought involving the idea that we had already formed concerning the nature of spirit-produced objects. If the answer had been a reflection of our own thought, as some have suggested, we would have received the confirmation of our theory instead of a contrary one.
Okay. So the question is, it could be that the things that we have here, we already have on the spiritual world, right? Could the invisible world contain an essential matter that assumes the forms of the objects that we see in this world? In other words, could the objects in this world have the etherical double in the visible world in the same way that humans have are represented there by spirits? again, pretty much like the idea of Plato, right? And the answer is no. They're not dead. They don't have like a snuff box in the spiritual world. They're waiting for the spirit to pick it up because it's already there, using matter of the spiritual world. The way that it works is that the spirit exert a power of the material element scattered throughout the space of your atmosphere, a power that you are far from having any inkling about. A spirit can concentrate these elements by using its will and give them an appearance that matches its intention. Sorry.
Number 5.
No, not yet. There's a few things important here. So it's not that they already have those things over there. No, there's the spirit create. The spirit create that snuff box. The spirit create the whatever object they want to bring to us. The spirit create the clothes that they use when they appear to us. How did they do that? Okay. They use their will, they use their mind to manipulate matter. What kind of matter talking about here? The Kardec says, material elements scattered throughout the space at your atmosphere. So things pertaining to this physical world, matter pertain to this physical world that can be manipulated to create whatever they want to create, and the energy to create is their intention, is their will. The material is this scattered matter pertaining to our atmosphere. I think this is extremely important. Okay. If they go to a different world with a different atmosphere, the spirits there use what they have there. They may not be able to reproduce, let's say, the snuff box. If in that atmosphere they does not contain the material necessary to build up that snuff box. Okay, I think this is very, very important, and we're gonna have to match this answer here with the one that we talked about when it was no, if the spirit would feel the same sensation, and we're going to see a number question 13 also. This answer over here matches that also. Okay, and Kardec makes a comment over here, just proof of authenticity in my understanding, saying that the spirits had already read pretty much their thoughts and the conclusion that Kardec had already gotten in. And if the spirits would be just giving answers created by our own incarnated thoughts, they should match. And in this case, it was contrary, because Kardec had already convinced that his theory was the right one, that it's what he stated on question number 4. And the spirit said, that's not the case. That's not it. Right? So the comment of Kardec is just like a proof of authenticity that the spirit is saying what the spirit has to say for himself, not based on our thoughts, what we think. No, if no comments, no questions, number 5.
I would once more categorically state the question in order to avoid any misunderstanding. Are the clothes worn by spirits something real? It seems to me that the preceding answer has resolved the question. Don't you already understand that the perispirit is something real?
Okay, so guys, I just want to reinforce that the cloth, the snuff box, is real, is material. Matter of elements of our atmosphere, but it's still ethereal matter that in a physical phenomenon is associated with all the kind of matter to make it visible and tangible. In the spiritual world, it is not be visible and tangible because would not have that extra component that we can call ectoplasm to make it visible and palpable to us incarnate. But it's something real. Kardec just wants to reinforce it. And the answer of St. Louis is a kind of, yes, didn't I say that already? How many times do I have to say that again? Number 6.
The explanation indicates that spirits submit ethereal matter to the transformations they desire. Thus, for example, in the case of the snuff box, the spirit did not find it already made, but it itself produced it when needed by an act of its will, and then unmade it in the same way. Is this the same procedure for all other objects, such as clothing, jewelry, etc.? But that is obvious.
Okay. So basically, in number 6, Kardec just compile all the answers from St. Louis and says, am I getting this right? And the answer, yes, that's exactly right. The spirit does not find anything already made over there. It builds it using, again, the energies, the will, and the material is matter scattered to our atmosphere. And by atmosphere, you're going to see things that are comparable with the physical and the spiritual world. As it says here, the spirit submit ethereal matter to the transformation they desire. Okay. Now, the only thing that I question, I don't have an answer, question, is when Kardec says that the spirit and then unmade it the same way. Is it necessary to unmake it? The spirit actually took the action of, oh, I don't need this enough about let me unmake it. I'm questioning that. I don't know. There is no more talk about it, but I met somebody with a question that as I am questioning and don't know if the spirit does unmake what was made over there, or if those things will make themselves naturally by disassociation of matter or whatever. Questions? Number 7 then?
Quick question. Could it be that when we ask about unmaking it, could it be that it's able to hide it? Because we've seen it in a few other aspects that things disappear, but they don't quite disappear. Could it be something related to that?
It could, but I think when you unmake, you just don't really hide it. You just unmake it. It's just like having a puzzle when you put the puzzle together and it looks, the pictures are there, and then you break down the puzzle and you unmake the puzzle. It's not there anymore. That's how I see it. But again, that's a question. I don't have the answer.
Thank you.
The 7?
The snuff box was made so visible to the lady that it produced the illusion of a real object. Could the spirit have also made it tangible to her? It could have.
Good. 8?
If so, could she have held it, believing it to be a real snuff box? Yes.
9?
If she had opened it, would she have found snuff? If she had inhaled some, might it have made her sneeze? Yes.
Okay. So you see for all those 3 questions, and St. Louis doesn't waste any time going beyond an explanation of his answer. The answer was for simple yes or no, and that's what Kardec got, a simple yes or no. Point is, it it will look absolutely equal. The real enough box that he carries on his incarnate state, on his conscious state, with all the details, even with the things inside as it is. Number 9 is the one that I relate a little bit with the very first question that he asked. If she had opened it, would you find the snuff box side? Yes, would find the tobacco side. If she had inhaled it, might it made her sneeze? The answer is yes. If you go back to the question and answer number 1, Kardec, if the spirit had inhaled it, would the spirit have the same sensation as we do when we sniff tobacco? His answer was no. But for the lady who is incarnate, if she had sniffed the tobacco inside the snuff box, would have the same sensation because she's incarnate. So there is I think that's very interesting that in the spirit state, although he was incarnate, but in an out-of-body experience, he would not have the same sensation. But she being incarnate, fully attached, so to say, to her body, should have the same sensations as any other incarnate being would have. I think that's very important to take note and keep that in mind because it might come back later. Any questions here? Okay. So now Kardec continues with the questioning, drilling Old St. Louis, very patient. And now we'll talk about the modification of the properties of matter. So he's going a little bit deeper on the same topic. Number 10.
Then a spirit doesn't merely form an object, but can endow it with its own particular properties. If it wants to, it was due to the principle that I responded in the affirmative to in the previous questions. You'll receive proofs of the powerful actions that a spirit exerts over matter and which you are far from imagining, as I have already stated.
Okay, so here's a part that is very much of a blind faith and trusting what St. Louis is saying for what the Spirit of St. Louis is, for what Kardec is, right? The Spirit doesn't merely form an object, but input in it all the particular properties of that object. So much so that in the case of the snuff box, the lady being fully incarnate and attached to the body would have all the sensations or sensorial abilities of a physical body when dealing with that material. Would look at it and see it looks exactly the same, the real one, would hold in her hand and be solid. If it's wood, would feel like the texture of wood. If it was metal, would feel like the weight and the texture of metal. If inside there was tobacco, if she's inhaled, if she sneezed, the tobacco would have the same effect in the physical body to properly sneeze. How the Spirit does that? Okay. And the answer here is very important. You will receive proofs of the powerful actions that the Spirit exerts over matter, and in which you are far from imagining, as I have already stated. So the Spirit can do a lot of more things that we can understand right now, that you require more revelations or more studies from our part. Personally, I think the Spirit has given us And northwest, we start doing our own work over here. $11.
Let us suppose that a spirit wanted to make a noxious substance, which a person then swallowed. Would he or she be poisoned? A spirit could do that, but wouldn't, because it would not be allowed to.
Okay, so that's a very good and important question also, because why? The spirits can do whatever they want with matter, they can produce whatever they want. Could they harm people as they at their own will? And the answer, perhaps they could, but they would not be allowed to. And you go back to the Spirit's book, and I think it's important when we are dealing with the issue of occult powers, talisman, and sorcerers. You know, the question 551, and Kardec asked the spirits, can a malicious person causing harm to a neighbor using the assistance of a bad spirit? The answer is very clear, no. God would not permit it. And of course, God over here, you understand as the natural laws created by God, right? And we can match with our studies of Thursday also, that there is a limit that we can use our free will. Again, free will is not so free, right? Because this question is extremely important. But the spirits can manipulate everything. They can use matter pertaining to our atmosphere, and with their will, they can create all kinds of stuff. If all my wills are evil is for destruction, can I go ahead and create evil and destruction? No, there is a limit. You'd not be allowed to do it, even if you had the potential to do it. You'd not be able to do it. 12.
Could a spirit produce a wholesome substance that could cure an illness? And has such a thing ever happened? Yes, many times.
13.
In the same way, could it make a nutritious substance? Let us suppose that it made a piece of fruit or something. Could someone eat it and feel satiated? Yes, yes. However, do not try so hard to figure out what is so very easy to comprehend. It only takes a ray of sunlight to enable your coarse organs to perceive the physical particles filling the air in the midst of which you live. Don't you realize that air contains water vapor? Condense it out and it will return to the solid state. Deprive those impalpable and invisible water molecules of heat, and you will see them transform into a solid object. Thus, chemists will form many other substances into other extraordinary, even more astonishing substances. Spirits simply possess instruments more perfect than yours, the will and permission of God. The above question in satiety is very important in this matter. How can a substance whose existence and properties are merely temporary and somehow conventional produce satiating? When it reaches the stomach, the substance produces the feeling of satiating, but not the satiety that would normally result from fullness. If such a substance can act on the organic economy and modify a morbid state, it can also act upon the stomach and cause a feeling of satiety. But we would ask pharmacists and restaurant owners not to be jealous or to think that spirits have arrived to compete with them. These cases are rare and exceptional and never depend on some individual's own will. Otherwise, everyone would be fed and healed too cheaply.
Okay. So if you want to manipulate matter to do evil, to kill people, would not be allowed to. What about the other way around? Could you produce wholesome substance that could cure illnesses and has such thing happened? And the answer is yes and yes. So if we're gonna use manipulate matter to do something good, it seems like you have a lot more free will than the other way around. And of course, we understand here with limitations as well, right? Because maybe I want to cure my mom or my grandma who has when my mom had dementia. Couldn't the spirits help me and take away the dementia of my mother and cure her brain? Perhaps they could. They didn't. They didn't. Is that because they did not want, or because it was not the best for her? So you have to understand that the spirit can do those things when it's for the benefit, not of the spirits themselves, not of us that are surrounding that spirit and we love that spirit very much, but in general, for the goodness of that spirit, him or herself. Perhaps the best for my mom was to go to that trial, but the best for us was to go to the trial and have our mom that way. Okay, so you need to be careful and say, well, if they can do good and cure and cure people, why are they not curing people? Why so many people, good people doing good stuff are dying of cancer, dying of all kinds of diseases throughout this world? Reasons way beyond our ability to understand. Okay, and the Spirit says has happened many. Some says that it has happened many times, but didn't say all the times to everyone. Okay, so you have to understand if it's good for the one receiving, for the receiver. Okay, perhaps the good for the receiver is to go to that trial. Perhaps the good for the spirit associated with the individual is to participate in that trial as well. Again, things will be way beyond our ability to understand the reasons and purpose of the trials that you go through here in this life. 13 is very interesting. In the same way, could make nutritious substances? Could they create a piece of fruit? I wonder if he was thinking of the multiplication of the bread and fish by Jesus. So could Jesus had multiplied the bread and the fish, use the same idea being proposed over here, right? And if I can create a piece of bread in the spiritual world and give someone to eat, if that's somebody be satiated and eliminate their hunger, of course temporarily, because you're gonna have to eat again. And the answer is yes and yes. So was that perhaps the mechanism of creation, the multiplication of the bread and the fish that Jesus used? Each one will interpret and answer for him or herself. Okay. But the answer is yes. We can create those nutritious substances. Very important. The understanding that all those particles are already in nature, are already in atmosphere. Okay, because you go back to the question number 4, God is telling us that the spirits grab those substances, those materials, those elements from the air, basically, right? Atmosphere from the air. And to manipulate with their will in association with other elements pertaining to the spiritual world and create those things, create those substances that are nutritious that can kill hunger temporarily. Whether they kill hunger, create satiety the same way that when we eat, let's say, a full meal, like general whatever meal you eat, the same amount that satisfies you the same way. And St. Louis says, be very careful here, okay? Don't overread on that. There's different ways that could create that satiety, okay? And Kardec says, Kardec says actually, when it reaches the stomach, the substance produces a feeling of satiety, but not the satiety that would normally result from fullness. So it's different. It's like eating a piece of bread, like a little mouthful of bread. When that piece of bread reaches the stomach, it gives you a sensation that you ate the whole bread. How does it work? Don't know. I have no idea. I can imagine for it. Association of stimulating hormones like glucagon. That give us, they'll alert the body, giving signals, say enough. We ate enough. We are happy here now. You don't need to put any more food in your mouth, right? Maybe it stimulates this kind of hormones, right? I don't know, but it produces the sensation of satiety with a little bit. So again, you go back to Jesus, and I just proposing hypothesis over here. I don't know what it is. When he multiplied the bread over there, and the thousands, whatever was by the mountain over there, feel satisfied. Did they have to eat each one of them a whole bread, or one piece of the bread gave the sensation of satiety for them to stay there and participate in the Sermon of the Mountain, right? Chemists will form many other substances in other extraordinary, even more astonishing substances. Spirits using, we, chemistry, working here, we use stuff, elements provided by nature, and you create all kinds of extraordinary things. The spirit simply possesses instruments more perfect than us. The will and permission of God. So they can utilize all the elements in nature, just like any chemistry profession in our world, but they have two powerful instruments. They have the will, that they can create things with their will, and of course the permission of God. When it's for good, when to create sensation of satiety when it's necessary, i.e., example, during the multiplication of the bread by Jesus, i.e., providing treatment for illnesses, i.e., when you drink our so-called magnetized water that you put in our home, in our spiritual center, having substances that helps us somehow. But again, help in accordance to our need, not in accordance to what we want. Okay, you have to keep always that in mind. Okay, but I have a terminal disease now. I can put some treatment that might magnetized water to kill me from that cancer. Again, we don't know what's best for us. They do. Questions?
I think we should mention the passes here right now, because this relates also to the passes, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But I think the passes is more pure energy, right? Not using material getting from atmosphere, as I understand it. The spiritual energy is more than using other elements.
Yeah, but I mentioned before, right, the possibility of a noxious substance or a wholesome substance that could cure illnesses, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
think that may relate to passes also.
yeah. In that case, yes. In that sense, I totally agree. Anybody else? It's 14 now, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
Can the objects that have been rendered tangible by a spirit's will remain in such a state and be used? That could happen, but it is never done, for it is outside ordinary laws.
Okay, so as I mentioned, it seems like especially three-dimensional objects, a flower, a book, a pen, that is brought, made feasible and tangible for us in the physical world, have a short life. It kind of disintegrates, disappears. Kardec disappears like shadow. Kardec used the expression, right? Could they make it stay? Okay. And the answer is that could happen, but it's never done, so it's outside of the ordinary laws. I think it's important. The word ordinary is still laws. Okay, but they are not ordinary, they are the exception to the rules. So that's why I personally don't like to say something is impossible. Somebody's gonna, is it possible such and such? I cannot say it's impossible, but it's unlikely. It's not inside of ordinary laws. It's not inside of the common, the everything. Is there specific circumstances that it can be made? The answer is perhaps it could, but it would be outside of the ordinary laws. But usually, objects that are created by spirits and brought to us have a short life. They disappear like shadows after some time. But in other extraordinary circumstances, but it's still inside all the laws, not a miracle, that could happen. 15.
Do all spirits possess the same degree of power for producing tangible objects? It is obvious that the more evolved the spirit is, the more easily it does so. But it also depends on the circumstances. Less evolved spirits can possess such power.
Okay, let's 16 also, please.
Is a spirit always aware of the way in which it produces its clothes or the objects it renders visible? No. It is often aided in their formation by an instinctive action which it itself does not comprehend if it is not sufficiently enlightened.
So this is extremely important. Can all spirits do the same thing? Common sense let us understand that no, right? Some spirits know more than others. Some spirits has more will, desire than others. But if the two things required to build things in the spiritual world is to have the will, is to want, and to manipulate elements in the atmosphere. And those elements in the atmosphere is there for everyone, right? And everyone has desire, has a will. So it kind of creates paradoxal. Well, some can do more, so other can do less. But theoretical, everybody has desires, everybody has wills, and the material in the atmosphere is there for everyone. So right. But not all possess the same degree to produce tangible objects. Some has more than others. Now, the 16 is very important also. That is a spirit always aware of the way in which it produces clothes and objects it renders visible? Very often, no. And I find that very interesting. Okay. It's often aided in their formation by an instinctive action, which it does not comprehend because it's not sufficiently enlightened. We can compare that with our use of technology here today. If you put in our hands the same kind of cell phone, okay, iPhone or Samsung, and the latest with artificial intelligence and all of those things, we all have, let's say that everybody has um, the same cell phone and the same carrier. Everybody has Verizon. Everybody has AT&T. I don't care. So that is absolutely the same. And we are all in the same room. Not say, oh, I was on top of the mountain. I was out in the ocean. Everybody in the same room. I have receiving very good Wi-Fi, and everything is equal. Will everybody use the cell phone the same way? Each one you use in accordance to their will. If all wants to do the same thing, will all be able to do the same thing? Some will not. Depends how one is familiar with that instrument. If someone is courageous to take chances to do whatever they want to do. So there is many variables, although the material is the same. We all have. And in potential, in theory, everyone should be able to do the same thing with the same material in the same room, with everything being equal. There is still a lot of variables. So that's what makes that differentiation in ability of spirits to create things in the spiritual world. Some will appear in the spiritual world dressed. Seeing mediums, we'll see spirits dressed. And if the medium asks the spirits, man, this is a nice shirt, where'd you get it? The spirit will not be able to answer. I have it. That's the one that I like. I use. Where did you get? How did you get it? I have no idea. The same way that we use this cell phone, you have no idea how these things work. It does wonderful things, this little thing in our hand. But if asking the average Joe, ask me, how these things work, how are you able to produce the information that you gather in these things, how this little thing gathers all this information that is placed in here, I will not be able to answer. I have no idea. I know how to use it. Somebody showed me how to use it, and I use it. So there is a lot of things that happens instinctively that we do not really understand the mechanism of action of those things, how we will come to have and to use those things. And I think it's a very important concept to understand. Is the spirit always aware of the way in which it produces its clothes and the object it rends visible? No, it's not. And I would imagine more often than not, it's often aided by therefore the formation by intuitive action. Well, I don't want to, as an spirit in kind of describing it, I don't want to be seen naked. I have to have clothes on. So instinctively, when it's time for me to present someone, I'll be dressed. How do I get that clothes? Well, using my desire, that my intention of being dressed to present myself dressed. And with that, instinctively, I will manipulate matter to create the clothes that I'm going to wear in the spiritual world. And if somebody sees me, they will see me dressed. Can I explain how the mechanism works? No, I can't. I have no idea how the mechanism works. And if we go back to the snuff box, we can question: did that man who was incarnate at the moment that he would have this out of body experience, did he think of it? Did he say, I have to create this enough box, let me gather the elements necessary here, and boom, 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 here, here's my hand now. Or it happened instinctively, naturally, with his intention, his desire to present himself as real, as totally comparable as he is in a conscious state. It just happened instinctively. More likely, it just happened instinctively. Questions? It's
Elmo, a quick
Yes.
question. Carol here. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I would imagine there is a hierarchy involved, though. I would think that, there maybe a lower order spirit is there, but at the advice of a fellow teacher or a hierarchy spirit, a higher spirit. I mean, it just seems like that would be the case.
I agree with you. Both for things a little bit more complex, 100%. But for clothes, which something so natural, again, it's very natural for us to be dressed. Here in the spiritual world, we're going to present ourselves, we're going to be dressed somehow. So instinctively is almost not knowing how we do it, but we do it. You dress yourself in the spiritual world. And for things that are so minimal like clothes, I don't think there is a need of another spirit to assist in that. I'm sure there are cases that will be needed, but I think it follows a natural process that does not require that much assistance. To produce things of higher value, let's say the nutritious substances that we mentioned over here, I totally agree with you. I believe that would be, they use the hierarchy, as you said, and higher order spirits would assist in the production of those substances. But again, that is my impression. Does anybody disagree? We're not going to go any more stuff to 28. Any more questions? Any more comments? I
Thank
think
you. Thank you, Elmo.
Carrie's comment is very important because it's almost like we, in our discussion, disconnected the guardian angel, the spirit overseeing harmony in that environment. Yeah, they are there and they will supervise what's happening, what's going on. We put limit to the free will again. You cannot use your power for evil to create poison. So there is a hierarchy, and I'm sure they will assist in when the assistance is needed. But I think things like clothing are so simple that may not require it. But again, all this is revelation being given to us. We will interpret and come to our conclusions, and that's my conclusion. Any more comments, any more questions? So Carol, Jean, do you have any information, anything?
So next Sunday is the Q&A, right? We have the Q&A session. That's it.
Okay, so save your questions, at least 3 from each one of you. Carol, can you give us a final prayer, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for hosting, Elmo. Thank you, John, as well. Thank you, everyone, for being here and participating. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks to be together again for our studies of the Medium's Book, Chapter 8, The Laboratory of the Invisible World. Spirit clothing may occur in appearance and looks tangible via the perispirit as a temporary representation, which can be manipulated and copied as well. Direct writing can appear on paper with words or drawings without a medium's hand, pencils, or ink. Precipitated paintings are also possible to be created with the interactions of spirit, their will, and matter beyond our complete understanding. Spirits can produce nutritious substances for curing, but would not be allowed to create noxious substances according to God's oversight. We are still learning and continue to study. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, our workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all spiritist centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. May we go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May we give the blessings for all of our fathers, grandfathers, grandparents as well on this special day. May peace and love prevail. So be it.